So the United States has entered into an agreement with Iran to end the war, and bottom line up front, not great. I mean, this agreement pretty heavily favors the Iranian regime. For example, they get a full lifting of sanctions, as well as an offer of a $300 billion investment into their country's reconstruction in exchange for a promise to keep talking about their nuclear program. That's a bit of a simplification, but not much. And from what I can see, this memorandum of understanding lays out terms that are worse for the United States and better for Iran than before the war started, which means this war moved us into a worse negotiating position as it sits today. Now, I want to be clear. There's a lot of spin coming out around this right now and very few official statements. So there's really two key things I want to go off of today. That's the U.S. demands prior to the war, what we were trying to get from Iran before the war started, and compare that with the memorandum of understanding that was leaked last night. Now, this has not been released by the U.S. government for some reason, and they keep pushing it down the road. Apparently, it's already been signed. Then they were going to release it after the signing, but it has been signed. And then, no, we have to wait until Friday. And no, there's a bunch of details that need to be hashed out. What we have today is a leak put together by Josh Block from the Hudson Institute. So take that with a necessary grain of salt. I will say this lines up loosely with what we were getting from the Pakistanis and the Iranians about what had been agreed upon. This leak, the full memorandum of understanding, as well as the White House talking points for this deal, will be linked in the description below. But let's get started with the most important aspect of all of this, the Iranian nuclear program. So before the war started, the U.S. demand was that Iran had to effectively dismantle everything. They had to dismantle Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, as well as other facilities, and transfer all enriched uranium to the United States. Bottom line, zero enrichment. Permanent deal, no enrichment anytime in the future for Iran. What we see in Articles 8 and 9 of this Memorandum of Understanding, they say the Islamic Republic of Iran reiterates that it will not produce nuclear weapons. The Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States have agreed that the fate of enriched material and the fate of all other mutually agreed nuclear-related issues will be adequately addressed in a final agreement. In other words, we promise to talk about this later. Article 9 says the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States agree that pending a final agreement, they will maintain the status quo. Iran will maintain the status quo on its nuclear program, and the United States will not impose new sanctions on Iran or strengthen its forces in the region. As in, we're going to keep talking about this in the future, but there's going to be no new sanctions. The United States will add no new military forces to the region. Again, just a promise, a good faith gesture from Iran here that we're taking at face value that we will talk about this at some point going forward. Best case when looking at that is that at some point down the road, we will get a good deal. But as of today, nothing has been agreed upon. The second big one here, sanctions. This was the major tool the United States had been using for years to try to implement change inside of Iran. Prior to the war, there was minimal sanctions relief offered. Essentially, this was a carrot, an economic carrot. If Iran comes to the table, this is, of course, something we could discuss. Iran, for their part, was demanding a full lifting of all sanctions, and according to this Memorandum of Understanding, it seems like that's what they got. So Articles 7 and 10 of the memorandum say, quote, the United States commits to ending, on a schedule to be agreed upon as part of the final agreement, all types of sanctions currently facing Iran, including resolutions of the UN Security Council and the IAEA, and all unilateral U.S. sanctions, both primary and secondary. They added that the United States undertakes that immediately after the signing of this Memorandum of Understanding and until the date of the lifting of sanctions, the U.S. Treasury will issue waivers for exports of Iranian crude oil as well as a number of other products and Iranian services. So a full lifting of sanctions, but that's going to take a minute to get there. So in the meantime, we will go ahead and lift all of the sanctions that the U.S. has imposed on Iran. That is entirely what Iran wanted, and it's like the thing the United States was using to try to influence Iranian behavior. It's very hard to look at that and say we came out on top on that one. It looks like we gave in, for lack of a better term. Now, I do want to stress there's a lot not in the Memorandum of Understanding. Some key aspects here, of course, details, which is critically important to anything of this magnitude. There's nothing about the dismantlement of nuclear facilities. There's nothing about the transfer or destruction of enriched uranium out of Iran. There's nothing about future enrichment limits for Iran. And there's nothing about IAEA verification beyond what Iran has just said they promised to do. There's also nothing in here about the Iranian ballistic missile program at all. And there's nothing about their proxy networks or these organizations that they fund around the Middle East and throughout the world. Those were key components leading into this. And even at the opening days of the war, stressed by President Trump and the administration that these were the non-negotiable issues in this conflict. Now, proxies were kind of addressed loosely. In Article 2 of the Memorandum of Understanding, it says the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States undertake to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity and to refrain from interfering in each other's internal affairs. I mean, it kind of says like, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone is the gist of that. But keep in mind, the proxies are an integral part of the Iranian defense strategy. And this kind of can be interpreted as, we're not going to mess with the proxies. You guys do you and we'll do us. But again, that's the closest this even comes to addressing the proxy issue. We have a couple key components here that have been added in. One of the most politically explosive right now is the $300 billion question. Now, pre-war, Iran was offering kind of some economic incentives to the United States. This was their attempt to kind of sway President Trump and his negotiating angle, offering oil investments, mining rights, even buying American goods, trying to make this somewhat attractive to President Trump. That seems to have completely shifted. Article 6 of the Memorandum of Understanding says, quote, the United States undertakes, together with its regional partners, to create a comprehensive plan for the rehabilitation and economic development of Iran, while ensuring financing of at least $300 billion. Now, a couple key components here. This does not say where the $300 billion is coming from. It could be released Iranian funds. It could be a fund put together from our partners in the Middle East. Very vague at this point, no doubt, like the entirety of this MOU, but without doubt, it says right there a $300 billion reinvestment fund into Iran. So we are offering incentives for Iran, right? Strait of Hormuz, also not discussed in the opening of the conflict, which is understandable because the Strait of Hormuz was operating as normal. It should be discussed in this agreement. It is. It's brought up in Articles 4 and 5, where they say the United States will lift the naval blockade and prevent any interference or obstruction against Iran and restore traffic within a maximum of 30 days to its full capacity. The traffic of ships shall be proportional to the pre-war volume of traffic on the part of Iran. The United States also undertakes to withdraw its forces from the surrounding areas within 30 days after the final agreement. So notably, Article 4 is about the United States releasing our blockade. All right? Article 5 then says the Islamic Republic of Iran will immediately take steps to ensure that the movement of merchant ships from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa is resumed within 30 days to the pre-war volume, taking in the need to account for the removal of technical obstacles and the neutralization of mines by Iran. So that Article 5, Iran will lift their effective blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Notable that both of those call 30 days that we have to get back to the full capacity. That's something underway right now. We'll see how that actually goes. There's nothing in here, I should stress, about the toll question that has been back and forth between Iran and the United States. That's just not mentioned at all. So take that however you will. Another big one here that was not brought up before the war and is now a critical component, a ceasefire in Lebanon. So it's not Lebanon that's the important thing here. It's Hezbollah, a proxy of the IRGC. Article 1, talk about how important this is to the two parties, or at least one of the two parties. Article 1 lays this out. It says the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States, together with their allies in the current war, declare an immediate and permanent end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, and undertake that from now on they will not launch any hostile action against each other and will refrain from the threat or the use of force against each other. That's talking about Israel and Hezbollah. Like, without actually using those words, that is the fighting that is going on in Lebanon. It hasn't stopped. There's been some leaks coming from Israel that they do not view themselves as a party to this agreement. In fact, since this was signed a couple days ago, there have been Israeli strikes into southern Lebanon, and there have been Hezbollah attacks into Israel. Either way, that is listed as the Article 1 in the Memorandum of Understanding, extending this ceasefire across the Middle East. So I do want to stress in summary that I'm not trying to cherry pick data here to paint one picture or another. I'll have all these sources linked in the description below. The White House, or the Memorandum of Understanding, the White House talking points, and then what I think is a pretty good roll-up, pretty good summary of the U.S. demands leading up to the war, put together by the Institute for the Study of War. And you can read from one to the next, and it is very hard for me to look at what the U.S. wanted going into this war and say that we got any of it on the back end. I mean, a great example here is the nuclear question is deferred. That was the thing, like the number one reason. And we're saying, we'll come back to that. There's no details on what that could involve. And in exchange for Iran agreeing to come back to the topic that we were addressing before the war, we've offered up a $300 billion reinvestment fund into their reconstruction, full sanctions removal, and opening the Strait of Hormuz, removing the U.S. blockade. To be honest, that's a tough pill to swallow. Does not feel like the United States is coming out on top in this one, but there's certainly more information to be had. My understanding is there's a signing ceremony on Friday. Maybe we'll get more details there, but as this sits right now, not great. Looks like Iran is effectively getting everything they wanted and more from the negotiating table before the first bombs dropped in this war. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.